And guess what? I just realized that for the past 10 minutes, I've been telling some really great jokes, but the microphone has been muted. So you guys missed all my wonderfulness that I was cracking myself up on. Okay, so we've got the recording going, and it is now time to start day 3 of our Summer of Code here in 2018. Yes, I am checking, making sure the microphone is on, and you are hearing me because my pre-show banter is not as important as what we are going to do here in just a moment. So definitely head on over to the chat room at WPStudio.com/chat, grab the handout, and we are going to be talking about PHP. If you've never worked with PHP, if you've never attended a live webinar here at WP Studio, first, welcome. And second, I treat all computer languages like another spoken language. I believe you can translate code into English. If I was strong enough in other languages like Russian, German, and Spanish, I would translate into that. But if all you can say is, ¿Dónde es el baño? Where's the bathroom? I'm not going to be able to translate code into Spanish or something. So what we are going to be doing today is diving into really understanding PHP, because regardless of what young developers or the current hot developers are pushing that JavaScript is the only way to go, WordPress still is a PHP-based framework, a content management system. The way WordPress communicates to the database, to the theme, gets information out, displays it, generates the look and the feel of the site, it is always in PHP. PHP is a foundational language that we must understand. So what we're going to do today is we're going to actually have the live page here, and we're going to play around with the PHP as we work in here. Now, we're not going to specifically be doing WordPress stuff, but what we are going to be working on today is understanding the core elements of PHP. Now, there is a foundational element of PHP, and that is a variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this, and anytime I want to make a comment, I'm going to leave this up here so that when I give you this file at the end of this session as part of the replay, you'll be able to look back in and analyze this, and you'll know each section that we've talked about. So I believe one of the core building blocks of PHP are variables. Variables are simply storage vehicles. So I want you to think about your website, your web server, the different sites that you may have on your server as a big city. And in order for us to get information around the city, we have to have cars and trucks and trains and other modes of transportation in which we're going to move people and goods to different parts of the city. And we may also have warehouses that store things. We may have stores where you actually can go get things out of it. These are variables. And PHP allows us to basically build our town and our transportation structure all around variables. So there are some rules to make a variable. But before we get into the rules that make a variable, when we talk about a programming language, a storage vehicle, other languages require you to give description or requirements of what can go in a storage vehicle. Whether we're storing a whole bunch of names, whether we're storing a whole bunch of numbers, whether we're storing a whole bunch of values, PHP does not require you to specify or define what is being stored. PHP figures it out. So if I've got a bunch of numbers there, PHP is going to know that the storage vehicle, this variable, is storing integers. If it knows that I am putting together a bunch of words, kind of strings of things, it knows that I'm storing a string, not an integer, or not a variable, or sorry, not an array. PHP figures that out. So from step one, it actually is fairly easy to get started working with variables. So let's talk about variables. There are some rules. So the first rule is every variable must have a unique name. So if I say variable 1, maybe I'm going to have muffin2 11t. So each of these are unique names. So every variable must have its own unique name. A PHP variable is preceded by or begins with the $sign. So once we have a $sign and a unique name, we have established a PHP variable as long as it is inside either a PHP file or inside the opening and closing PHP bracket that is saying, hey, we are using PHP here. Now, once we have our $sign, a variable must begin with either a letter or an underscore. You cannot have a variable beginning after the $sign with a number. So if you ever need a number-based variable, simply put an underscore, and you will be able to have a valid PHP variable. Now, this is different than this. This variable is different than this variable because a variable is case sensitive. So because a variable is case sensitive, most best practices say all your PHP variables should have a lowercase system, unless there's actually a perfect reason for it. Now that we've talked about these rules, anytime we want to assign information to a variable, we simply use regular mathematical expressions, like an equals. And then I can say 15. So if I'm saying underscore var1 equals 15, when I go here, and again, anything that occurs in PHP, let's just add 12. I'm going to do a bunch of things here. Muffin 2 plus 3. var1 minus I'm trying to get something a little more complex, and then finally muffin 2. Okay, so I've got a bunch of these items where this one we're saying, hey, that should be 15. We're assigning the number 12 to this one. Then we're saying, hey, take muffin 2 plus 3, so now this one should be 15. The variable 11d should be var1, which is 15, minus muffins 2, which actually is 15, so 11d should actually equal 0. And then you can assign whatever the value is for this one is going to go to this variable. So there's a lot of different ways to assign information. Now, we're going to use this next command in PHP to display something. Because right now, if I simply save this and take a look at the page, there's going to be nothing that shows. Because PHP itself does not render anything to a browser. I cannot even come over here and say, oh, let's view the page source. Oh, there's nothing here. Well, there actually is something here, but PHP is not able to be seen because of the way a server is set up to. This is a language that outputs to HTML. So one of the ways I can output is a command called echo. And when I echo underscore var1, we should see the number 15 show up here. Why? Because we are echoing out whatever the value is. Great, we get that. We can even check other ones. Well, let's check 11D. We're echoing that out. It's 0 because we've been able to do all these type of, basic math. So we're going to skip over a bunch of these things, but I do just want to point out, and I'm going to put this in a comment so that you'll have it later. You can use addition, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modulus, which is the remainder of x divided by y, so that if you did this, if you put a modulus, this one would be the remainder of whatever's here divided by this, and then there's an exponential, which is a double one. So this exponential just treats it as a raising to the x to the y power or to the x power, whatever it is. So we can use a lot of arithmetic. Now, we're going to come back to some of the other comparisons, but it is vitally important that we understand another part of PHP. Yes, we're going to do some comparisons and logic statements here in just a moment. PHP allows us in the variables to store basic information. But we can also store a lot of information. Now, if I were to sit here and do we're going to talk about arrays here. Now, if I were to sit here, and I'm going to comment this echo out just so that we have nothing showing. If I were to have a simple that would store words like muffin, bananas, apples, strawberry, blueberry, and then we echoed that out, simple, we would see all of them. So, sure, I can store all of these foods, fruits and foods, in a single variable. But it is not helpful at all, because I can't individually say, go get me the first one, go get me the second one, do something with it, sort the thing, all these things. So instead of storing everything as a string of items, now we could write some additional code that would, explode this whole thing, treat each one as an individual separated by a comma, but why do all that extra work when you can set up everything in a PHP array? A PHP array simply says we are going to treat every single thing in the storage variable as a unique item. So if I were to change this simple to an array, now when I echo, it's simply going to say, oh, you've got an array of information. So in order for me to see that, we need to print out the array. Whoops. Print the array. So that we can now see there is a array. Inside the array is a muffin, banana, apple, strawberry, blueberry. So, Now, why is this important? Because at any point, we can then cycle through something. So before we get into how to manipulate this array, let's talk about why that is important. Why having an array of information allows us to use another core element in WordPress. So we're going to be going back, another core element in PHP. We're going to going back and forth between arrays and something called a loop. Loop. So a loop is the way PHP is able to process large quantities of data or an array or information by doing the command only once. Now, if we were to look at how WordPress handles or WordPress does a loop, WordPress actually has something called the WordPress Loop, which is the PHP method of cycling through all your posts. So just so you can mentally grasp onto something, when WordPress wants to show the 10 latest blog posts, it's only going to demonstrate how to put the post title, the post content, the author information. It's only going to show that once. But what the loop does is it says every single time you go through the loop, you're going to take the next blog post, insert the title there, insert the content there. Now we're done. We go to the next post and insert the title there, insert the content there. And it kind of cycles through. Well, one of the things that we can do for this in WordPress is start to cycle through this. So I'm going to use this simple thing because we already know simple is an array because it shows it's an array when we printed it out. So if I wanted to sit here and demonstrate each one of these items, let's first start by this. We're going to, because we're in PHP, I'm going to echo something out, and I can echo out HTML. And by echoing out an unordered list, it means when I start to loop through each one of the items in the array, I'll be able to give it information. I will be able to treat it as an individual list item. So what I can now do is for each is exactly what it would, this is a PHP instruction that is exactly how the English language uses it. For each something, I want you to treat that as this. So what we do is we say for each simple, again, we're grabbing the PHP variable which contains the array, and because the array says, hey, you've got individual items all stored together, so for each of the items that are found in here, I want you to treat them as a new variable called food. So by simply stating a for each command, we are going to begin the PHP loop. And what we can do is list item, food, close the list item. Now, there's something to learn here. Let me actually finish this up by now echoing out the closing unordered list. Let's see that in practice, and then I'll explain this one little line. So now you're going to see that we have a, oops. What did I run into here? See here, simple, we do not have to define this because we are saying simple. Why is that not running out here? Bear with me one second. I lost my notes here. So give me 1 second here. I have to open up my thing. I've lost my item here. I accidentally closed out of my handout, and so all right. Don't need to close PHP on this. Good question. But as I'm, again, bear with me 1 second. The document just is hating right now. No, I didn't store it on Slack, which would have been pretty bad. Okay. Let's head back over here. So I'm going to say for each simple, let's just treat it as which should be fine. It's simply going to come here. Oh, I know why. I'm still storing this as a single array. This is a stupid mistake. How do I know this is see, this is a single item because there's an open quote, and the open quote doesn't close till this one. So all of this is treated as an individual item. So I needed to actually say each of these are individual. Can't believe I missed that. Okay, so now that we have this, you're actually going to see it all a little bit differently. So I should have noticed it when my array was only returning a single item. So in this one, notice how we now we're going through each of the items in the simple array, treating them as an individual item. So each time we go through the loop, it's an individual item, so we are echoing out this variable. Well, we set that variable here, and it treats each one as a list item. And yes, so when we originally printed out the array, we can actually see, oh, here's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Even though there are 5 items, an array will always start with 0. Food does work. You could put this back here. Again, you can assign anything as this. Inside the for each statement, this is going and getting a variable that exists somewhere else in the document, and then you are assigning each individual item in the array to a new variable. This variable, food, does not work outside of this for each statement. It only works inside it. All right. Now, so this is one way to display everything. But remember how I said when we started talking about arrays, developers need ways to identify individual items. So if I wanted to echo, watch this. I'm going to put a break around here so that we can actually start seeing. You're going to see why I'm doing this in just a moment. Okay, because inside this one, we're going to put echo simple 2. So this echo statement, let me put some space in here so we can talk specifically about this. When you look at an array, you're going to see an identifier. Sometimes you may have a unique ID or an identifier and a value. If no value is assigned, like this, where each one is treated individually, well, then they are automatically given a number so that we can target, and it always starts with 0. So if I did this, simple 2, that should mean that apples should show up right here. So when I save this and refresh, we should see apples show up. If I change this one to 4, it should show up as blueberries. So now, because we have a PHP variable that is storing an array, we can now individually go in and get information. Why is this important? The way especially for WordPress, when WordPress stores a content piece in the database, everything is stored in the exact same structure. So the title is always going to be, at this number 2 spot, or it's going to have this ID that specifies it. It's always going to have, I don't know, we'll just call it title or something. And then the value would go to the title. So that's kind of what is happening in PHP when we talk about WordPress. So that we only, in our theme or our template or whatever we're using to display something on the front end or on the back end, we only have to write the code once, the display code, when PHP goes to get information out and display it. If we know what part of the array or what part of the variable is storing the page title, we can simply do it once, and now every single blog post will be run through that. All right. But now it's time to manipulate this array. So we've got this array here. We're going to go ahead and leave the print R so we can see it. And then this is actually a listing of our items. Knowing how to manipulate an array is vitally important for any WordPress user. And there's fairly simple pieces of information. So let's say, for example, you have a plugin or you have a theme that is creating an array from their own stuff, but you need to add additional items to the array. If you know what the variable is that is storing that array of information, a lot of times you'll find it in the documentations, you can add your own information by pushing your own values into this array. So for example, if I sat here and I use the PHP command array push, I can say which variable, PHP variable, am I going to push stuff into? I'm going to push it into our simple variable. Well, what are we pushing into it? A peach. I'm pushing a peach in. So simply by refreshing this, now take a look at this. In my list, there's a peach showing up. Well, guess what? In the original array, there is no peach. That's because PHP is a logical language that starts at the top of the file, continues on down, and it just processes each instruction as it goes. So because we've already printed out this PHP variable as an array, and then after that we're adding information. And yes, this does add the number automatically. So if I were to actually come down here and print it out again after I pushed items, you're going to see that, great, now we've got another array. And again, it starts here, array. Notice how number 5 is assigned to peach. Array push simply adds the item. But there's another way we can do it. You don't have to use an array push. There's an even simpler way of doing it, and you're going to see this a lot in the code. So if you ever come across code that you're looking through, you're trying to customize in other plugins or other themes, and you see a PHP variable with an open closing bracket, that means it is simply an array push command. We've already established what the name of the variable is, and so now we can start doing oranges. Save. We take a look at this, and now take a look at this. Not only was this through the array push, this is through the actual variable push, and we now have oranges in our list. Okay. So that's one thing. Array push is a way we can add things to it. We can also remove an element from the end of the array using the function array pop. So if I did this, let me actually get rid of, I'm going to comment these out just so that they're gone. We can always add them back in. If I use something called array pop, and I simply say simple, you call the variable. When we go take a look at the list, Blueberry is gone. It's here in the original array. We popped it off the end. Why is this something that would be useful? Because if we start cycling through the items, every time we go through the cycle, we could basically, you can echo out something from the array, you're displaying something from the array, then you array pop to remove that thing, and it's no longer in the array. You're not messing with the original array, you're not messing with the original storage vehicle, you are now starting to manipulate it. Now, array pop removes it from the end. Array shift removes things from the top. So if we took a look at this, now our muffins are gone, because that was the top one, our muffins are gone here. So we can start to shift. Now, this array push adds something to the end. So if we did this array push, array shift, basically what we've now done is we've added peach to the end, and we've removed muffin from the top. And that's the shift. If we array unshift, this is kind of something, and it's really weird. So array shift is removing something off the top. Array unshift is adding something to the top. So if we array unshift, now nuts are getting added. Now remember, when we array pushed, it adds it to the end. When we array unshift, it adds it to the top. Now you may be wondering, okay, where's the practical purpose for this? When WordPress goes into the loop to go to the query to get information about every blog post and gets it out of the database to display it, it's all coming back as an array. It's coming back as this post object that is cycling through the stuff, finding all these things. And so by understanding that, you know what, we can shift things, we can move things, we can add things in. Because if you start to understand the structure of a WordPress post, you could use something like an unshift to add in a default post that always shows up, regardless of the query. Because you're now putting it at the top of whatever is returned out of the database. Now, This is all great, but at the same time, sometimes we need to be able to sort everything. We need a way to alphabetize things. And in PHP, it's already built into arrays where we can sort something. So we're alphabetizing in ascending order, or you can reverse sort or descend, rsort. So by looking at this array unshift, I am going to, before we do the loop of cycling through something, I'm going to sort our simple. And we're going to see that this should completely alphabetize immediately without us having to do anything. Why is this awesome? Because if you're building a site for a non-profit and you're running a query that says, hey, just go get me all of the members, the member names. Maybe you need to write your own output page. So it's just a very generic query. You can now sort, alphabetize it, or reverse alphabetize with a simple PHP array function. All right, so when we start working with that, now, so we've got arrays, we've set variables. The loop is a way for us to cycle through anything in the array. Let's back up shortly here. The true power of PHP. Yes, arrays are awesome of storing lots of complex information. We only looked at some basic things that we're storing. And the ability to loop through and treat every item inside an array as an individual item is really cool because it gives us flexibility on how we output the content. But I think the true power of PHP is in its ability to handle logic, a comparison, where we can start saying things like, how do these things compare? So we're going to set up, we'll call this our comparison / logic area in our document. And I'm just going to simply comparison. I'm echoing this out. Let's see if that'll. Oh, let's just add some HTML around it so that it will treat it as a separate area. Okay, so we've got our comparison here. And then below this, everything we do, I want to put some space between. I'm going to put a break, or let's do a horizontal line, just so that we know where this little section that we're going to play around with here for quite a bit. Everything shows up here. This way we won't lose the array stuff we're playing with. Okay. So, as a side note, you probably already realized we can always echo out directly to HTML. It's basically we're echoing out a string of information that the browser is now treating this as a direct display. Even though this is a PHP file, if we put HTML in there, a browser is going to look at HTML tags, HTML elements, and treat it like HTML and try and interpret it based on just default browser style sheets. All right, comparisons. Let's go ahead and create several different things. I'm going to say we have, let's talk about the different types of comparisons. And in order for us to do this, we're going to do mean equals 9, median equals 10, and mode equals 9. All right. This way we can play around with this. Now, anytime we are looking at a comparison using PHP's logic statements, we're looking for an answer that is binary. We're looking for a true or false. We're looking for, is it yes or no? Is this a true statement or is this a false statement? So that's actually what PHP, when we compare, we're looking to retrieve an answer from PHP. And so let's first start by saying we're going to compare the mean. Is it less than the median? Well, is it? So mean is 9, median is 10. So this would return a true statement. Now this is just an example code. This is not going to do anything on the front end, so we're going to have to remove this, but you're going to see why this is something that we will handle. So we can do a less than. Well, what if we reverse that and said mean is greater than median? So if we do that, this is going to return a false statement. If we now say, is median less than or equal to mode? Well, median is 10. Is it less than or equal to 9? That's going to return false. If we take it the other way and work on median is greater than or equal to mode, is going to be true because 10 is equal to the... do I keep saying medium? I meant to say median. And Ben, yeah, mean, mode, median, these are when we take averages. Think about it, median. So yeah, they mean they mean what they say. They mean what they say, even if they're a mode. And then if you want ice cream, you can get a la mode. All right. Let's continue on before I get way off track. So then we can do mean equals mode. Does mean equal mode? The answer is true. Now, why am I doing a double equals sign? Because when we begin to use comparisons of is it equal, is it not equal, is different than identical. Watch this. Mean equals 9. If I'm storing an integer, let's do me2. If I'm storing an integer in a PHP variable, it's not going to be wrapped in a quote mark. Because the moment I store as a value in a PHP variable a quote mark, I'm storing it as a string. So when I say is mean2, let's do that, mean2 equal to mode, yeah, it's true. They're both 9. But mean2 equals mode is false. Because when you see 3, we're talking about identical in terms of the value and the type of item being stored. Is it an integer? Is it a string? Is it, an array? So this is where we start getting comparisons of doing 2 or 3. A lot of first-time PHP developers sit there and they're like, do I need to check if mean2 is not equal to mode? Or do I need to check mean2 is not equal mode? Where is that? This does not mean not equal. This means not identical. This does not mean not equal. Sorry, this means not equal, but it's not looking at the type of value being stored. Does that make sense? If you see 3, it's trying to look for everything to be absolutely the same. If you only see 2, it's only looking at the value. Equal versus identical is a big trip up for a lot of people. Now, the other ones that we could deal with are if you simply use a single equal, because it's so hard to, unless you absolutely know what is stored in each one of the variables, I would never use that because you don't know if something incorrectly got put into the variable. Where you would use an equal is if you are actually storing something or you are actually doing arithmetic. Is 5 equals 5. It's just safer with PHP to think of a single equals is a way we are storing the information, not for comparisons. But there is one other that is this. This is exactly the same as this. If you use the less than greater than, it says not equal. If you use the question mark equal, that means not equal. I would not use this because this is more logical using this that we already have here. Any questions on comparisons? Basically, you're able to say greater than, or greater than and equal, or equal, identical, not equal, not identical. All right. There's another part of the comparisons. So again, each one of these comparisons is looking for an answer. So, if each one of these are looking for an answer, and I'm going to comment out these because this will actually break the PHP code because it's not an actual comparison. This is just an example here. We always want to ask a question if, or actually we can get a result. A result would be if something is true, we're going to do something. So let's wrap something here. The same way we had a for each, which is going to split the array into individual items and allow us to treat those individual items as we need. You will also see in many PHP files, in WordPress templates, files, themes, you will see something called an if. And we will echo muffins are awesome. So that's if whatever is in here returns true. So the if statement is always looking for something to be true in order to do whatever is inside the braces. If this is not true, it's not going to do anything in here. So if I were to do if 5 equals 5, and we run this through, I just told you don't use that. If 5 equals 5, it echoes muffins are awesome. If 4 is equal to 5, oh, it didn't do this echo. So when we start doing these comparisons, we can do a lot more. So if we were to jump over here and go grab this mean equals mode, if mean, this one, 9 equals mode, we're going to echo out muffins are awesome. And we should see muffins are awesome because that's true. But if we did median and it comes here, muffins are awesome goes away because this turns out to be false. Now, to simply explode your brain even further, in the same way we use this exclamation point to basically reverse it, where this is equal, this is identical, this is not equal, not identical, I can simply say if exclamation point, and we're looking for the opposite. We're looking for the false statement. So because we know median, which is 10, does not equal mode, but we're looking for it to not equal, it's going to show, if this is not, median, mode, if it's not true, that's going to get, I know, hold on. Before we go there, let me hold off, because I tried to jump the gun on this. So let me back up. We tried to break PHP here. So we need to do logical. We did these are comparisons, but we need operators. And there are really 4 types of operators that we use in PHP. Yes, there's more, but for the most part, most WordPress sites are only using these. There's the AND statement, where we can combine 2 things, and that's looking for all values must match. Or we could see a double pipe, the vertical pipe, and that's going to be the OR statement, and that says one of the values must match. Or we can have an XOR, which is going to say at least one of the values must match. But we're going to talk about the 2 differences between the end and the double pipes. And so what I'm going to do here is we're going to create 2 statements. And one of them is if mean equals mode, and then end, and we'll do median equals mode. Okay, so now take a look at this. We have wrapped a comparison and a comparison, and then we've combined them with a logical operator that says both comparisons must be true in order for us to echo muffins are awesome. Well, we know that mean is 9, mode is 9. This is a yes, this is a true. Median and mode do not equal because this is 10 and this is 9. So therefore, it should not echo muffins are awesome because we've not compared them. But if we replace the end sign, the and logical comparison, with the or, at least one of the values must match. So it doesn't matter whether it's this one or this one or both. So when I do this, muffins are awesome. Now, what if I change this one so that they both match? Again, I'm doing the exact same expression. So when we refresh, muffins are awesome because the double pipe or the OR statement says, I don't care how many of the stringed comparisons that match. I don't care how many of them return true. I just need at least one of them to return true. But if you use the XOR, you say one of these must return true, but both cannot. So if I now save that, muffins are awesome should go away because XOR says both of these cannot be true. Now, where is this helpful in WordPress? Now, if you've been around me and my training for a long time, you know I love conditional logic statements, and it's one of the powers that WordPress provides, and you can learn more about those things. But one example is WordPress comes up with lots of conditional logic statements that can tell whether are we on the front page. And so that is a predefined check. It's a function that in core WordPress, there is code that is looking at a visitor's current screen. Are they on the front page? It's going to return a true or a false. So when we start doing, and again, this is not going to work because we're not in WordPress, we're just in a PHP. But if we're on the front page, and then we have end, question mark, not, is blog, or is feed, is not the feed. So a feed would be the blog page list, an archive page is something else. So we're now trying to say, is this true? And is this true that we're not on a feed? So this would be like maybe you've created a custom home page that is a default landing page that has nothing to do with the blog feed. Then we could show that. So understanding how we can start doing logical operators to combine PHP statements that are looking for a true or a false statement is where the power of WordPress starts to open up. Because we can combine things. We're looking to make sure we have thought through the whole process. Remember that computers are dumb. We've got to tell it what to do in every single situation. And so therefore we need to start thinking ahead. And maybe you do is front page or is singular, so it's a single, either a blog post or a custom post type or an actual page, and then I can do is author Benjamin. So if I am the author of a single post, page, custom post type, I'm going to echo out muffins. Anybody else who's on a singular one and is some other author, we're not going to echo this out. So when we begin editing, customizing, tweaking the WordPress themes that we may already have for our own sites or our client sites, beginning to understand how you can do these comparisons and these logic is going to open the door. Because there are many times we may be looking at a theme and we're simply going to be like, you know what, I want that page title to show up, but maybe if I just wrap my own conditional tag around what my current theme already does, I can get more control over it. All right, so we have talked a lot about arrays, comparisons, looping through things. There is a ton more with PHP. But when we look at PHP for WordPress users, we just need to remember variables store our information. Once we have things in variables, we're storing things, we're putting things, we're assigning things to variables, we can begin comparing those. And based upon the comparison, we can begin to choose when something will show, when something won't show. And then we have ways of displaying all content through the loop. That's where PHP and WordPress are just so joined at the hip, because both of them, one of the core elements of the PHP language and one of the core elements of WordPress is the ability to loop through information so that we only have to write the code once. That's one of the core tenets of most developers is don't repeat yourself in code. So that's why we have things like array shift, adding things to the array, because we only establish what the array is once, and then we can manipulate going forward. We don't have to reiterate the array. Now, one other thing that I just want to point out to everybody that may make life easier. I'm going to bring back this echo the 11D. So we see this 0. Oh, this is going to cause an error because this doesn't exist. Let me take that out. Okay, so we have a 0 here because 11D is here. The same way where CSS, the cascading style sheets, the last entry or the last version of a declaration, a rule set that we talked about yesterday, that takes precedence. That is what is used. PHP is similar because if I do 11D, I'd have to do 11T equals 11T. Notice how I have two 11Ds. One of them is up here that's doing a calculation. One of them is simply a string. When I go look at this, guess what? It's the second or last declaration of what this PHP variable is. So if you're working in your code or you're playing around in the code and for some reason it was working and then because you declared the same name, this is invalidated. This no longer exists. The new value for 11D is this. You can overwrite something. So for those of you who like to hack other websites, other plugins, and other things, if you're just getting started and you don't quite understand it, but you know at a core level it's trying to use a certain variable found here, as long as you place a new variable with something else, you can overwrite whatever that plugin was doing before that point by simply declaring your own new variable using the same name. So CSS and PHP have similarities in terms of the last time in CSS a rule set is declared, a declaration is made, declaration block, and the last time a PHP variable is established with a value or assigned a value, that is what takes precedence. All right, I've really been trying to keep these Summer of Code sessions right at an hour so that we all have time to repair for our brains. Tomorrow we're going to dive into some jQuery, kind of do a little bit of PHP, a little bit of jQuery, a little bit of CSS, a little bit of HTML, wrap it all together in tomorrow's session. I hope for many of you this was a good reminder and encouragement about what you do with variables, arrays, loops, strings, comparisons, logics. If it's the first time through, I encourage you, you can always rewatch the thing over on YouTube or in the members library. And I hope you have a great rest of the Wednesday, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Take care, everybody, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.